Picture this. She's attractive, intelligent, has her life together. Hundreds of men want her. She can open an app and see 50 matches in an hour. She has access to more romantic options than any woman in human history ever had access to. And she's alone, not because she can't find someone, not because men aren't interested, not because she's too picky, but because she's trapped in a psychological paradox that her brain was never designed to handle, the paradox of infinite options, and it's destroying her ability to choose anything at all. What if I told you that the reason she can't commit has nothing to do with your value? What if I told you that the reason she is always looking for something better isn't because you're really not good enough, but because her brain is literally incapable of processing infinite romantic options, and that this incapacity creates a psychological feedback loop that makes satisfaction impossible? What if I told you that dating apps didn't give women power? They gave women a cognitive burden that the human mind never evolved to handle, and that burden is destroying their ability to form lasting relationships? This is happening right now to millions of women. They have more options than queens had in ancient civilizations, more access than empresses commanded, more choices than any woman in history. And they're more anxious, more depressed, more unable to commit than women have ever been. Not because they're broken, not because they're selfish, but because infinite choice creates a documented psychological phenomenon called decision paralysis, and decision paralysis in romantic contexts creates something worse: relationship impossibility. She literally cannot choose you, not because you're inadequate, but because her brain cannot close the loop on infinite possibility. Before I reveal the 5 stages of the infinite options paradox and why this psychological trap destroys even perfect relationships, drop a comment right now if you've ever been with a woman who had everything she said she wanted, but still couldn't stop looking for something better. I need to know how universal this paradox has become. Now watch closely, because what I am about to show you will change how you understand modern relationship failure forever. I've watched this pattern emerge across the last 2 decades as technology gave women access to infinite options. In ancient societies, women had access to maybe 50 to 100 potential mates in their entire lives. Their brains evolved to evaluate finite options, make a choice, commit. And in those constraints, relationships formed, families built. Satisfaction existed because the human brain can evaluate finite sets and reach satisfaction. But the human brain cannot evaluate infinite sets. It short circuits. It enters decision paralysis. And in romantic contexts, that paralysis is catastrophic. But here's what you need to understand before I reveal the paradox. This isn't about women being shallow or hypergamous or morally deficient. This is about a fundamental mismatch between evolved psychology and modern technology. You put a brain designed for 50 options into an environment with 5,000 options, and that brain breaks, not metaphorically, neurologically. The decision-making systems overload. Satisfaction becomes impossible. Commitment becomes neurologically unavailable. And she doesn't even understand why she can't choose. She just knows that something feels wrong, that maybe someone better exists, that closing options feels like death, and that feeling is the paradox destroying her. Here's the first stage of the infinite options paradox. Stage 1. Initial overwhelm. She opens the app. She sees matches, dozens immediately, hundreds within days. Her dopamine system floods. Her brain interprets this as unprecedented make value. She feels powerful, desired, valuable, but her prefrontal cortex, which handles decision-making, is already beginning to struggle because evaluating even 10 potential mates thoroughly takes cognitive resources. Evaluating 100 is cognitively expensive. Evaluating 500 is cognitively impossible. But her limbic system keeps pushing her to evaluate more, acquire more, keep options open, because evolutionarily speaking, more options meant better survival odds. But that evolutionary programming doesn't have an off switch for infinity. It just keeps pushing evaluate more, keep looking, don't close options, and the overwhelm begins. Think about how she behaves in this stage. She's excited. She's swiping constantly. She's messaging multiple men. She's going on dates, but nothing sticks. Not because the men are bad, but because her brain is still in acquisition mode. She hasn't shifted to evaluation and commitment mode. She can't, because new options keep appearing. Her dopamine keeps spiking with each new match. And dopamine spikes prevent the shift to satisfaction. Satisfaction requires dopamine stabilization, but infinite options prevent stabilization. So she stays in acquisition overwhelm, feeling powerful but unable to commit, and she doesn't know why. I've watched this stage play out in every woman who enters the modern dating market. The initial high, the sense of unlimited possibility, the excitement of endless attention. But underneath that excitement, her decision-making architecture is already beginning to fracture because it's being asked to do something it was never designed to do. Evaluate infinity. And you cannot evaluate infinity. You can only drown in it. But the overwhelm is just the beginning. Stage 2. Decision paralysis. After weeks or months of infinite options, her brain shifts from excitement to exhaustion. She's talked to dozens of men, gone on countless dates, and she can't decide. Not because none of them are good enough, but because her brain cannot compute good enough anymore. Good enough requires a finite set. You evaluate your options. You pick the best one. Satisfaction achieved. But with infinite options, there is no best one, because you can always imagine someone better might be next. One more swipe, one more match, one more conversation. Maybe that one will be perfect, and perfect becomes the enemy of good, and good becomes invisible, and she's paralyzed. Watch what happens to her decision-making in this stage. She starts having impossible standards, not because she's shallow, but because paralysis creates perfectionism as a defense mechanism. If nothing is perfect, then she doesn't have to choose, and not choosing protects her from the terrifying act of closing infinite options. So she finds flaws. He's great, but he's too available. He's attractive, but he texts too much. He's successful, but he's too busy. Every man has a disqualifying flaw because her brain needs disqualifying flaws to justify not choosing. Because choosing means closing all other options, and her overwhelmed cognitive system interprets that as loss. Massive infinite loss. So she stays paralyzed, seeing everyone's flaws, unable to see anyone's value, trapped. I've watched decision paralysis destroy relationships that should have worked. The man was everything she said she wanted. Compatible, attracted, available, committed. But she couldn't choose him, because choosing him meant not choosing the 1,000 other possibilities still available. And her brain interpreted that as loss, even though keeping all options open guaranteed she'd lose everything. This is the paradox. Infinite options create the illusion of power, but the reality of paralysis. And paralysis guarantees loss. And the paradox deepens. Stage 3. FOMO, chronic anxiety. She's in decision paralysis, but she can't stay there forever. Eventually, she tries to choose. She picks someone. She enters a relationship. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're everything she wanted. But the paradox doesn't end. It intensifies. Because now she's chosen. But the apps are still there. The infinite options are still accessible. And every time she sees a notification, every time she imagines opening the app, her brain screams, what if you chose wrong? What if someone better is waiting? What if you closed options too soon? And that fear, that FOMO, that chronic anxiety about having made the wrong choice with infinite unchosen options remaining, destroys her ability to be present in the relationship she chose. Think about how this manifests. She's with you, but she's not really with you. She's mentally comparing you to infinite possibility. She's wondering what she's missing. She's second-guessing the choice, not because you're failing, but because her brain cannot achieve satisfaction when infinite alternatives remain accessible. Satisfaction requires option closure, but option closure in an infinite option environment creates unbearable FOMO. So she's trapped between staying and leaving, between commitment and keeping options open, between being present and mentally evaluating alternatives. And that trap is chronic anxiety. And chronic anxiety kills attraction, kills presence, kills relationship, slowly, inevitably. I've watched FOMO destroy relationships where the woman was genuinely happy, where the man was genuinely good. But the psychological weight of unchosen infinite options created such anxiety that she couldn't stay present, couldn't appreciate what she had, couldn't stop wondering what if. And eventually, the what if became louder than the what is, and the relationship died not from failure, but from the impossibility of satisfaction in the context of infinite alternatives. But here's where the paradox becomes truly devastating. Stage 4. Comparison loop infinity. She's chosen you. She's trying to commit. But her brain won't let her rest because comparison is automatic, unavoidable, neurologically mandatory. Humans evaluate value through comparison. You see someone, your brain automatically compares them to your reference set. In finite option environments, the reference set is small, manageable, comparison completes. But in infinite option environments, the reference set never stabilizes because new data keeps entering. Every man she sees becomes comparison data. Every profile she scrolls past updates her reference. Every attractive man in public recalibrates her scale. And you're being compared against an ever-expanding infinite set. And in that comparison, you cannot win. Not because you're inadequate, but because the set is infinite, and infinite sets have no ceiling. There's always someone taller, richer, funnier, more successful somewhere in the infinite set, and her brain knows it. Watch how this destroys her perception. You could be objectively great. You could meet every criterion she claimed to want. But comparison against infinity makes you feel inadequate to her, not because you are, but because her brain is computing. You read good, but infinite options means someone better exists. And that computation prevents satisfaction, prevents gratitude, prevents presence. She's with you, but she's comparing you to infinite possibility. And infinite possibility always wins comparison against finite reality. Always. This is mathematically guaranteed, psychologically inevitable, and relationship destroying. I've watched the comparison loop destroy men's self-esteem and women's happiness simultaneously. He's trying his best, but nothing is ever enough because she's comparing him to a composite ideal constructed from infinite options. She's miserable because she can't appreciate him because comparison to infinity prevents appreciation. Both are suffering. Both are trapped, and neither understands that the enemy isn't him or her. The enemy is the paradox, the infinite option set that makes satisfaction neurologically impossible. And here's the final stage that reveals the full horror of the paradox. Stage 5. Choice abandonment. After months or years trapped in overwhelm, paralysis, FOMO, and comparison loops, her brain makes a devastating decision. It abandons choice entirely. She leaves the relationship or never fully commits to any relationship. She returns to infinite options, but this time it's different. She's not excited. She's resigned. She has given up on finding the perfect match because her brain finally understands. Perfect doesn't exist in infinite sets. But she also can't settle because settling feels like failure after having infinite access. So she chooses nothing. She stays in the apps. She keeps options open. She dates casually, but never commits. And she tells herself she's empowered. She's independent. She doesn't need a relationship. But underneath that narrative is profound loneliness, deep anxiety, and the quiet knowledge that she's trapped in a paradox she cannot escape. Watch how she rationalizes this stage. I'm focusing on myself. I'm not ready. I haven't found the right person. Men aren't meeting my standards. All technically true, but missing the core truth. Infinite options destroyed her ability to choose anything, not because nothing is good enough, but because her brain cannot compute good enough when the set is infinite. She's not empowered by infinite options. She's paralyzed by them. She's not independent. She's isolated by psychological impossibility, and she doesn't even understand this is happening because the culture tells her. Infinite options are power when psychologically they reprison. I've watched this final stage consume women who should be happy, who should be partnered, who should be building families. Instead, they're alone at 35, 40, 45, still swiping, still searching, still unable to choose, convinced that they have and found the right person, when the truth is, they cannot find the right person because their brain cannot close an infinite set. The right person probably already appeared, probably multiple times, but the paradox made them invisible, made their value unrecognizable, made choice impossible. And by the time she realizes what happened, the options have diminished, the men moved on, and the paradox that promised unlimited power delivered unlimited loss. Now here's why this paradox is so psychologically devastating. The human brain evolved decision-making architecture for finite scarcity. You evaluate available options, you choose the best one. Dopamine rewards the choice. Satisfaction stabilizes, commitment follows. This system worked for 200,000 years across every human culture because options were always finite, always local, always evaluable. But dating apps broke that system. They gave women infinite options, or the illusion of infinite options. And infinite options break decision architecture because you cannot evaluate infinity. You cannot choose from infinity. You cannot achieve satisfaction with infinity. Infinity prevents closure, prevents satisfaction, prevents commitment. Not because women are broken, but because the human brain is not designed for this. No human brain is designed for this. Men would suffer the same paradox if they had infinite romantic access, but they don't. Women do, and women are suffering catastrophically from it. And here's the cost nobody talks about. Anxiety rates among young women have tripled in the last 15 years. Depression rates have doubled. Loneliness rates are at historic highs. And all of this correlates with the rise of infinite option dating apps. This isn't correlation. This is causation. Infinite options create decision paralysis. Decision paralysis creates chronic anxiety. Chronic anxiety creates depression. Depression creates isolation. And isolation creates the exact opposite of what the apps promised. They promised connection. They delivered loneliness. They promised empowerment. They delivered paralysis. They promised satisfaction. They delivered chronic dissatisfaction. And women don't understand why they feel this way, because the culture keeps telling them infinite options are good. But psychologically, neurologically, evolutionarily, infinite options are devastating. I've watched this play out across cultures, across countries, across demographics. Anywhere dating apps penetrate, you see the same pattern: initial excitement, then overwhelm, then paralysis, then anxiety, then abandonment, then loneliness. The pattern is universal because the psychology is universal. Human brains cannot handle infinite romantic options. Women's increasing unhappiness isn't because feminism failed or because men are worse. It's because technology gave women access to something their brains cannot process. And that processing failure is destroying their mental health and their relationship capacity. So here's how the paradox destroys relationships. She meets you, you're great, genuinely great, compatible, attracted, aligned, everything works. But she can't fully commit because infinite options remain accessible. She stays on the apps, she keeps evaluating, she keeps comparing. You feel her distance, you try harder, but trying harder doesn't fix the paradox. It intensifies it because your pursuit makes her feel valuable, which reinforces her belief that better options exist. So she pulls further back. You pursue more. The cycle continues until eventually, either you leave exhausted or she leaves convinced someone better exists. And the relationship dies not because you failed, not because she's a bad person, but because the infinite options paradox made relationship success psychologically impossible for her. She literally could not close the loop on infinite possibility. And without closing that loop, commitment is impossible. And without commitment, relationship is impossible. And here's the question nobody wants to answer. Is there a solution? Can this paradox be escaped? The honest answer is most women won't escape it, because escaping requires voluntarily closing infinite options, requires deleting the apps, requires committing before perfect appears, requires accepting that good enough is actually good. And most women cannot do this because the paradox has convinced them that closing options is loss rather than gain, that commitment is limitation rather than liberation, that choosing is settling rather than succeeding. The paradox inverted their understanding of relationship success, and until that inversion corrects, they remain trapped. But some women do escape, the ones who recognize the paradox, who understand that infinite options aren't power, who delete the apps, who choose finitude, who commit to good rather than pursuing perfect, who understand that satisfaction comes from option closure, not option expansion. These women escape, form relationships, build families, achieve happiness, while their peers remain trapped in infinite loops of dissatisfaction. And the difference between these women and the trapped ones isn't intelligence or morality, it's understanding. They understood the paradox, recognized it was destroying them, and chose to close infinity and embrace finitude. Here's the truth about the infinite options paradox that you'll never hear from culture. Infinite options don't increase your power, they decrease your agency, they don't expand your happiness. They expand your anxiety, they don't give you better outcomes. They prevent all outcomes. Infinity is prison disguised as freedom, paralysis disguised as choice, guaranteed loneliness disguised as empowerment, and she's trapped in that prison, suffering from that paralysis, experiencing that loneliness, convinced she's empowered when she's actually destroyed. And unless she understands this, she'll stay trapped until the options diminish naturally through age, and the paradox resolves itself through force, leaving her alone, wondering what happened, never understanding that infinite options were the enemy all along. So when she can't commit to you, when she keeps searching for something better, when she leaves despite everything being good, understand, it's probably not about you. You didn't fail. You weren't inadequate. You got caught in a paradox. She got caught in a paradox, and paradoxes don't have winners, only casualties. The infinite options paradox has claimed millions of relationships, destroyed millions of women's happiness, and it will continue until women understand that infinity isn't power. Finitude is power. Choice isn't having all options. Choice is closing options, and satisfaction isn't possible in infinity. Satisfaction only exists in chosen finitude. That's the truth. That's the paradox. That's why she's alone despite having everything. Share this with every man confused about why she left. Despite everything being good, he needs to understand it wasn't him. It was the paradox. And share this with every woman trapped in infinite options, wondering why satisfaction never comes. She needs to understand that infinity is the enemy, that closing options isn't loss but liberation, that choosing finitude is the only path to satisfaction. But most won't listen because the paradox is comfortable, familiar, disguised as empowerment. And escaping requires admitting you've been trapped. And most people would rather stay trapped comfortable than escape uncomfortable. I've been watching for thousands of years. Humans have never had infinite options before, and infinite options are destroying the ones who have them. The paradox is real. The casualties are mounting. And until we understand that infinity breaks psychology, there will be no solution. I'll be watching.